Hey friends, today we're going into a real case that happened very recently and hit Brazilian news hard. Before we get started, I have one quick favor to ask. Drop a couple of words in the comments or just hit the like button under the video. It really helps the channel. Picture this. Late April 2026, busy roads around Araraquara in the state of São Paulo. In the middle of traffic is 53-year-old Cleomar Borges Gomes. He's riding a regular bicycle, not a dollar to his name, with a machete sticking out of his backpack. At that very moment, patrol units across the state are scanning the roads, looking for him. Alerts have gone out to every crew, but the fugitive seems to have vanished into thin air. And that's where things start to feel almost unreal. In an age of security cameras, how does someone manage to stay ahead of law enforcement on two wheels, out in the open? But somehow, Cleomar does exactly that. He is the main suspect. Just a few days before this chase, investigators say he did something irreversible in the middle of a residential street, in broad daylight. His target was a 20-year-old young woman, known online as Geninha Forozera. Her real name was Geniane Pereira. So how did their paths even cross? What led to that final encounter? And why didn't the justice system step in when it still had time? Stay with me, because from here, we're going to rebuild this story step by step. While patrol units were unsuccessfully checking the exits from nearby districts across São Paulo state, detectives in the city of Pontal were only just beginning a detailed examination of the crime scene. Everything unfolded on April 24th, 2026, in the quiet residential neighborhood of Adelia Fonseca. People in that area were just starting a normal weekday morning, heading out for their usual routines, when around 9 o'clock, loud, piercing screams came from Albano Menegali Street. A local resident, Juliana Ortolau, was inside her home at that moment. She clearly heard the strange noise coming from outside, along with desperate cries for help. Realizing that something serious was happening out on the street, and that someone needed help right away, she didn't hesitate. She ran straight out into her yard, then hurried onto the roadway. There, on the gray pavement, not far from the corner near a large house, a young woman was lying on the ground. At first, Juliana thought the passerby might have gotten sick because of the weather, blacked out, and collapsed in the street. But when Juliana got closer, she saw something far more disturbing. The stranger's clothing was badly torn, and underneath it, there were multiple deep injuries. The young woman was still trying to breathe, but she was already in critical condition. She couldn't say a single word to explain what had happened or name the person who had done it. While other neighbors, drawn outside by the screams, frantically called emergency services, Juliana dropped to her knees right there on the hard roadway. She carefully lifted the young woman's head, gently rested it on her lap, and stayed that way, trying to calm her and give her some kind of comfort until medical help arrived. Juliana had never seen this young woman in the neighborhood before, but she could not leave her alone in those terrifying minutes. Soon, an ambulance crew arrived at the scene with its sirens on. The paramedics moved the injured young woman into a fully equipped emergency vehicle and rushed her to the nearest hospital as fast as they could. She was taken straight into the intensive care unit at Santa Casa de Pontal Hospital. Local surgeons immediately began emergency efforts to save her, but her injuries were too severe. A short time later, doctors confirmed that the patient had not survived, right there in the operating room. Meanwhile, back on the blocked-off section of Albano Menegali Street, a forensic team was already at work. As they carefully examined the roadway, they found one of the most important pieces of evidence from the attack: a sharp steel blade from a knife with the handle completely missing. The wooden grip had broken apart and flown off because of the extreme force behind the aggressor's repeated strikes. Investigators immediately started working to identify the young woman through the databases available to them. At the same time, they began questioning people who lived in the nearby houses, trying to understand what could have led to such a public attack in broad daylight. The database search gave them a clear answer. The victim was a 20-year-old young woman who performed online under the stage name Geninha Forozera. Her real name was Geniane Pereira, but the detail that stunned everyone was this: she had come to Pontal from a completely different state exactly 14 days earlier. 2 weeks. That is a very short amount of time for someone to make enemies dangerous enough to do something this extreme in a public place. So what hidden threat had been following her from the moment she arrived in this unfamiliar city? Let's break it down. When detectives confirmed Geniane's identity and ran her information through their system, the result that came back was completely unexpected. It turned out there was no need to search for some secret, mysterious enemy. The name of the person who posed a direct and obvious threat to the 20-year-old was already listed in the most recent reports from that very same precinct. To understand the full context and keep the timeline clear, we need to pause on one important fact. When Geniane arrived in Pontal exactly 14 days earlier, she temporarily moved into a private home with a longtime friend. The owner of that spacious house was her friend's own father, 53-year-old Cleomar Borges Gomez. The two young women planned to stay there only at first, just long enough to find work, get settled, and save a little money so they could rent a place of their own. But that grown man would become the reason the two tenants rushed to the authorities just a few days before the tragedy on Albano Menegali Street. They were not simply asking officers for advice. They were directly asking to be protected from an out-of-control homeowner. Inside the very house where the two young women thought they had found a safe place to stay during their move, a serious conflict broke out. Cleomar suddenly went into an aggressive rage. He deliberately destroyed their personal belongings and tore up their everyday clothes. This was far beyond a normal family argument. Later, when voice messages from people close to Geniane began circulating online, another disturbing detail from that loud incident came out. It turned out that the damaged furniture and broken items were only a small part of his aggression. According to those accounts, the homeowner tried to go after Geniane while she was in bed. Terrified, the two young women did not stay quiet about what had happened. They went for help right away. Patrol officers responded to the call. Cleomar was taken in and questioned at the station. At that point, officers seemed to have everything they needed to immediately separate this aggressive man from the public. Direct statements from two frightened witnesses, damaged belongings, and clear signs of destruction inside the room. It looked like the protection system had done its job, and the potential threat had been removed. But then came a complete failure. After a brief conversation, the officer simply let him walk back out onto the street. He was not ordered to stay away from the young women. He was not held even for a single day. No protective presence was placed near the house. Cleomar stepped back outside, fully aware that there had been no real consequence for what he had just done. Now, left on their own, with a man who had already shown he was willing to cause physical harm, Geniane and her friend realized they could not count on help. Under intense stress, they quickly gathered whatever belongings were still intact and left that house for good. They found a temporary place to stay in another part of town, sincerely hoping that distance would solve the problem. They continued going to work every day, trying to survive and get on their feet in a place that was still unfamiliar to them. But Cleomar had no intention of stopping. After walking away with no real consequences, he began tracking their new routes. So how did a newcomer end up under the same roof as this man in the first place? And what secrets were buried in his past? That's where the facts begin to change the whole picture. To understand how Jenny-Yan ended up caught in this dangerous trap, we need to step back and take a closer look at the aggressor's own background. Cleomar Borges Gomes was not originally from São Paulo state. The 53-year-old had moved to the more developed city of Pontal from another part of Brazil, the state of Minas Gerais. His reason for moving was practical. He was looking for steady work and better economic conditions, the kind of opportunities he simply could not find back home. After Cleomar left, his own daughter stayed behind in Minas Gerais, and this is where a detail comes up that is hard to process in any normal human way. The relationships inside that family were not just strained, they were openly destructive. From audio recordings that would later surface online through people close to the case, a dark mark in Cleomar's past became known. Long before he moved to Pontal, Cleomar had already tried to seriously harm his own daughter. In any healthy society, after an incident like that, contact between relatives would usually be cut off forever, but that is not how things played out here. After some time, father and daughter started talking again. Somehow, they smoothed things over and rebuilt the connection. Meanwhile, Cleomar had settled in Pontal, found a house, and started building a new routine in a new city. His daughter, still back in their home state, was dealing with a hard financial reality. In smaller towns across Minas Gerais, it was extremely difficult for young people to find work that allowed them to do more than just scrape by. Building any real plan for the future felt almost impossible. The constant lack of money and the absence of real career prospects pushed her to look for a way out. Eventually, she made the decision that would set this entire irreversible chain of events in motion. She would move to Pontal and stay with her father, hoping to take advantage of the stronger job market in the city. But going alone to another state was not easy for her, so she asked her best friend to come along. That friend was Jenny-Yan Pereira. Their plan was simple and clear. They would stay with Cleomar only at the beginning. The main goal was to find jobs in Pontal as quickly as possible, save money from their first paychecks, and then move into a rented place of their own, just the two of them. When Jenny-Yan accepted that offer, it must have seemed like a safe option. She believed she was going to stay under the roof of an older relative connected to someone she trusted. She did not know all the disturbing details of that family's past. So who was Jenny-Yan back home? And why did she need money badly enough to leave everything behind and travel hundreds of miles away? Let's stay with the facts. To understand Jenny-Yan's real motives, we need to go back. Long before that life-changing trip to São Paulo, her life looked completely different. Jenny-Yan Pereira was born on July 17, 2005, in the small rural community of Terra Cavada, located in the municipality of Minas Novas. She was raised by her single mother, Marli Pereira. Her father had not been present in her life from the very beginning. Only when Jenny-Yan turned 15 did she make a conscious effort to find the other side of her family. She learned that her biological father had passed away long before, but the search was not for nothing. Jenny-Yan met his relatives and quickly became part of their circle. She grew especially close to her cousin Allison, and from that point on, the two stayed in close contact. Back home, many people knew Jian. From an early age, she was deeply involved in dance. Later, she became an official dancer for the popular music group Usadia do Forró de Capelinha. On stage, she gave everything she had. Her movements had real power, clean timing, and sharp precision. Over time, she built a solid local following. Business owners in the area started inviting the bright young performer more and more often to take part in regional ad shoots. On social media, her followers were used to seeing a cheerful, full-of-life young woman performing under the name Ganinha Forrozeira, someone whose life, from the outside, seemed to be going exactly right. But behind that polished, carefree online image was a much harder reality. The region where she lived offered almost no real path for career growth. The money she earned from occasional performances and small commercial shoots was not enough to build any serious savings. Jian was deeply attached to her mother and to the people around her. She called home every day, but in the end, ambition started pulling harder. Her goals were completely understandable. She wanted to buy her own house, get a reliable car, and stop living in a way where every dollar had to be counted. That intense need to break out of a cycle of financial pressure is what pushed her to agree to move to an unfamiliar city. On April 10, 2026, a whole group of people gathered at the local bus station to see her off. Relatives and close friends, including her best friend Thais Leao, came to wish Jian luck with this new chapter. Thais stayed behind in their home state. Jian, with one packed suitcase, boarded an intercity bus. She arrived at the address in Pontal, walked into the spacious house of a 53-year-old man, and began unpacking her things, hoping she was stepping into a productive and peaceful stage of her life. She had no idea that the man who owned that house had already started watching her closely. So how did the illusion of a normal life fall apart in just a few days? And what became the main trigger for his uncontrollable aggression? During the first days under Cleomar's roof in Pontal, everything seemed to be going according to plan. The two newcomers quickly found work, adjusted to their new schedule, and started saving the money they earned. Jian regularly called her mother, happily telling her that everything was moving along and that financial independence finally felt close. But the calm routine ended incredibly fast. The original verbal agreement was abruptly broken by the homeowner. Cleomar suddenly announced that the two tenants had to pay him a large amount of rent to keep staying there. That demand was the first warning sign that the situation was changing. But the real threat was something else entirely. The money issue turned out to be a convenient excuse for control, a way to stay close, apply pressure, and shrink the distance between himself and the young women in his house. The 53-year-old's behavior began changing quickly and in a frightening way. He started showing open, intrusive interest in his daughter's 20-year-old friend. Before long, that interest crossed into direct, inappropriate physical contact. Inside the house, Cleomar moved close to Jian and deliberately touched her in an inappropriate way. Jian reacted immediately. She shut it down firmly, made her boundaries clear, and told him that behavior like that toward her was completely unacceptable. But her direct refusal did not stop the aggressor. On the contrary, the rejection only turned his attention into obsessive tracking. After Jian pushed him away, Cleomar began studying the young women's schedule in detail. He kept track of the exact time they left for work, figured out the streets they used, and watched closely for when they came back. living under the same roof had turned into a trap, with psychological pressure building every single day. The trigger for what was coming was something painfully ordinary. Cleomar found out that Jenny-Ann had drawn the attention of a local man in Pontal. According to one version, he heard it by chance while listening in on someone else's conversation. According to another, the young women themselves casually mentioned the new acquaintance. Either way, that information hit like a detonator. The thought that the newcomer was talking to another guy set off a wave of uncontrolled, destructive jealousy in Cleomar. That rumor is what started the chain of aggression we talked about earlier. The wrecked room, the destroyed personal belongings, the torn clothing, and the attempted assault while Jenny-Ann was in bed. That was the exact incident that pushed the terrified young women to run to the police station and ask for help. And that was where the justice system failed, leaving the aggressor free. Now the picture is clear. The two tenants had moved into a temporary safe place, having lost part of their clothing and belongings. But Cleomar had already studied their morning route to work in detail. He knew exactly what time they would be walking through the residential streets. So how did everything unfold on April 24th at that intersection? And why did Jenny-Ann have almost no chance to get away? Stay with me, because now we're going to walk through the aggressor's movements, moment by moment, on that morning. The timeline brings us back to the morning of April 24th. Jenny-Ann and her best friend leave the temporary place where they had been staying for the past few days after their emergency escape from the unstable homeowner. The two young women head out on foot toward their usual workplaces. Their morning route takes them through the quiet residential neighborhood of Adelia Fonseca. They walk along the concrete sidewalk, following their regular schedule, with no idea what is waiting ahead. They truly believed that changing where they lived had finally given them the safety they had been desperate for. But on Albano Menegali Street, Cleomar had already set up a carefully planned ambush. He had arrived at that intersection ahead of time. He chose a hidden position behind the solid metal gate of a large corner house, a spot that completely blocked his larger frame from the view of the street. For extra cover, he wore a heavy jacket and pulled the hood low over his face. When Jenny-Ann and her companion came right up to the corner of the building, Cleomar suddenly stepped out from the blind spot and cut them off. He acted with focus and control. He did not even try to go after both of them at once. First, he turned directly to his own daughter. In a harsh, commanding tone, he ordered her to step back immediately and stay out of it. Frightened, she instinctively moved back, opening up the space in front of him. Jenny-Ann was left standing alone on the gray pavement. Without any long argument, without even trying to talk things through, Cleomar pulled out a sharp weapon and went after her. The blows came one after another, with no pause. Later, medical examiners would document at least 9 deep injuries on the 20-year-old's body. The assault happened with such frightening speed and uncontrolled rage that Jenny-Ann had no real chance to brace herself, defend herself in any meaningful way, or even call loudly enough for help from the nearby homes. Then, just as suddenly, the sequence stopped. The steel blade could not withstand the force. With a loud crack, it snapped away from the handle and fell onto the road with a sharp metallic sound. All that was left in the aggressor's fist was the empty wooden handle. Once Cleomar realized he was holding nothing but a useless piece of wood, he stopped immediately. He did not panic. He did not stumble around the crime scene. He simply threw the broken handle aside, turned his whole body, and headed toward his transportation. Nearby, next to a neighbor's fence, his regular bicycle was parked. Cleomar got on the seat and started pedaling at a steady pace, calmly riding away toward the exit from the residential neighborhood. Jenny-Ann was left lying in the middle of the road, while her friend stood frozen in deep psychological shock. Less than a minute later, Juliana Ortelau would run out of the neighboring house. By then, Cleomar was already leaving the area. So where would this strange chase lead? And why would the response from the authorities spark anger among local residents? After Cleomar calmly rode away from the intersection, the investigation into this high-profile case was officially taken over by local detective Claudio Messias. What happened on that street was immediately treated as a targeted crime rooted in hostility toward a woman. After reviewing witness statements and the full picture of that terrible morning, investigators confirmed the main motive. It was the same painful jealousy we talked about earlier. Jealousy that had grown out of a badly twisted interpretation of basic friendliness. In the end, the wounded ego of a grown man, after being firmly rejected for his inappropriate advances, led to a carefully planned act of retaliation. That same day, Cleomar Borges Gomes was officially considered a fugitive. Police launched a wide search for a man traveling between towns on a bicycle. On Sunday, a witness report came in. The suspect had been seen in the Araraquara area. He was still pedaling, still with no money on him, and a machete was sticking out of his backpack. And this is where local residents began raising very fair questions about how the agencies were handling the case. On social media, rumors quickly started spreading that someone from Cleomar's old circle was actively helping him, hiding him on private properties that were hard to access. The actual offender was still out of reach, while patrol officers kept checking tree lines, rural roads, and back routes with no result. Cleomar's own daughter, the one who had seen everything from beginning to end, shut herself off from the outside world completely. She made no public statement. She deleted or locked all of her accounts and stopped responding even to close friends. She was left in an extremely difficult and almost unbearable position. She had become a key witness for the prosecution against her own father. On Sunday, April 26th, Jenny-Ann was brought back to her home state of Minas Gerais. In the rural community of Terra Cavada, at the home of her mother, Marli Pereira, family and friends gathered for an incredibly painful goodbye. Marli, who had believed until the very end that her daughter had left to build a safer, more stable life, received condolences from people across the entire area. In Jenny-Ann's memory, friends and colleagues began widely sharing Taina Bittencourt's song, Vivendo Existindo, online. For people in the community, that heartfelt track is now tied almost entirely to Jenny-Ann. A young, bright person with clear plans for the future had her life taken away because of someone else's obsession. And this case could have stayed hanging in the air, unresolved. But the public pressure did what it was supposed to do. The offender could not keep running forever on two wheels. On April 29th, exactly 5 days after the attack, Cleomar was finally tracked down. Police carried out a forceful arrest right in a public square in the city of Ribeirão Preto. Once he was in handcuffs, with cameras rolling, the aggressor quickly lost all of that confidence he seemed to have before. During his first official questioning, he fully admitted responsibility and confirmed that he had acted out of uncontrolled jealousy. Cleomar Borges Gomes is now being held without bail and is awaiting trial. The trial that should bring the final answer in this case. Write in the comments what kind of punishment you believe this man deserves. and take care of yourselves. Thank you for listening to this story all the way to the end.
Support us by liking and subscribing. Share your theories in the comments. Until next time, stay vigilant.